Cale walked through the wide corridors of the Arendor City Tower, his steps quiet against the polished metal floor. His uniform was simple, a standard security guard outfit that made him almost invisible among the higher-ranked officers and diplomats bustling around. No one gave him a second glance. Most people thought of him as just another guard, nothing more. But Cale was careful, observant. He noticed everything. At the top of the tower, Lyra stepped onto the balcony, her long hair catching the artificial sunlight streaming through the massive windows. She was the daughter of one of the most powerful diplomats on the colony, and everyone respected her. Or at least they pretended to. Cale watched from the shadow of a nearby pillar, his eyes scanning the horizon outside. His heart beat a little faster each time he saw her. Not for himself, but because he knew the threats that lurked even in a place as peaceful as Arendor. Today was ordinary, meetings, data reviews, and formal greetings. Nothing seemed unusual, but Cale had learned not to trust ordinary. He had trained his entire life for situations like this. Years in the security corps had taught him patience, alertness, and the quiet courage that no one noticed until it was too late. Most guards would have moved closer to Lyra, trying to show themselves, hoping to gain her attention. Cale stayed back, hidden, watching, waiting. Lyra smiled at a passing envoy, her laughter light and carefree. Cale allowed himself a small, protective nod. She didn't know how close danger could be. Not yet. As she returned to her private quarters, Cale followed at a discreet distance. Every door, every corridor, every movement of the crowd was noted, in his mind. He knew the layout of the tower better than most of the staff. If an alarm sounded, if a threat appeared, he would be ready. Inside Lyra's private room, she glanced out the window at the floating gardens below. "It's so peaceful. Today," she said softly. "I almost forget that this city has enemies." Cale stood by the door, nodding slightly. "Peace is often the quiet before the storm," he replied. The words were simple, but there was a weight to them. Lyra glanced at him and smiled faintly, thinking he was just a careful guard. "You always sound so serious, Cale," she said. She didn't know that his seriousness came from years of seeing the worst humanity and its enemies could do. Outside, in the skies above the colony, a faint signal flickered in Cale's wrist monitor. He froze. Something was moving far from the city, beyond the protective shields, beyond the usual patrols. He scanned the readings again. His stomach tightened. The signal was not ordinary. It was large, complex, and approaching fast. Cale quietly. "Access the city's defense systems through his personal terminal." His eyes widened as he realized what he was seeing. Hundreds, maybe thousands of ships or drones, moving in precise formation, each one bristling with weapons, each one targeting the heart of the colony. 3,000. That was the number, flashing in red on his screen. 3,000 enemies. And they were coming straight for the city. He took a deep breath, keeping his expression calm. He could feel Lyra's eyes on him. She had followed him, curious about his sudden stillness. "What is it?" she asked. Cale hesitated, weighing his words. If he panicked, the staff would think it was a false alarm. He didn't want anyone to dismiss the threat. "There's an incoming fleet," he said finally. "It's large, very large. We may need to evacuate civilians." Lyra's eyes widened. "Evacuate? Cale, how could they get here without anyone noticing?" "They are fast, and they are organized," Cale said quietly. "We have little time. I need to contact the command center." He tapped a few commands into his terminal. A silent alert was sent to the city's security network. Minutes felt like hours. The command center staff was slow to respond. Cale knew bureaucracy was one of the greatest threats in any emergency. Every second mattered. Lyra watched him, anxiety creeping across her face. Is it dangerous? Cale looked at her calmly, though his mind raced. It will be dangerous if we don't act, he said, but I will make sure you stay safe. His words were steady, confident. He wanted her to believe him. He wanted her to trust him. She didn't know yet how much she needed to. He moved swiftly to secure the immediate area. Doors were locked. Drones' detection grids were activated, and defensive turrets quietly positioned themselves on the upper floors. Cale's movements were silent but precise. Every action had a purpose. Every choice counted. Lyra stepped closer, her voice trembling, slightly. Kyle, why are you doing all this? Because it has to be done, he said simply. Because someone must protect those who cannot protect themselves. And because that includes you. For a moment, Lyra didn't understand the full meaning of his words. To her, he was still just a guard, a quiet figure always near her. But Cale's eyes, steady and unwavering, told a different story. He was not just a guard. He was a protector, a man willing to face whatever came for her without hesitation. Outside, the horizon glimmered with faint red lights, distant yet growing. Cale felt the weight of what was coming. 3,000 enemy ships were heading straight for Arendor. He could already calculate the paths, the potential points of attack, the weak spots in the city's defenses. But the numbers were staggering. He looked at Lyra once more, her face pale but determined. Stay close to me, he instructed. And, trust me, Lyra nodded. In that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. She did not yet know the true danger. She did not yet know the bravery hidden behind the calm guard she had often overlooked. But she would soon learn. And when the storm came, Cale would be ready to risk everything to keep her safe. The city might have been peaceful, but Cale knew that peace was about to end. And when the enemy arrived, no one, not even the diplomats or the guards, would be ready for what was coming. Only one man stood between the fleet and the people. Kyle. He adjusted his equipment, checked his weapons, and prepared for the fight of his life. And though Lyra still thought he was just a guard, Cale's mind was already racing with strategies, escape routes, and plans to protect her, because sometimes being unseen was the greatest power of all. The city of Arendor was calm on the surface, but beneath that calm, alarms and warnings quietly rippled through the security network. Kyle moved swiftly through the halls of the city control center, his eyes scanning multiple displays at once. The signal from the approaching fleet was still growing stronger, confirming his worst fears. Thousands of enemy drones were moving closer, faster than anyone had predicted. He tapped his comm link and sent a secure message to the command center. Incoming fleet, 3,000 units. Target, the central city core. Immediate action required. Minutes passed. Cale could feel every second stretching, each one heavier than the last. The response from the command center was slow. Red tape, disbelief, and hesitation, all the things he had trained against in simulations, were now real. Some officers argued over protocols. Others debated whether the threat was even genuine. Cale clenched his jaw. There was no time for debate. Every moment mattered. Lyra, still unaware of the full scale of the threat, followed Cale into the control hub. She walked past rows of glowing consoles and holographic displays. Kyle, what's happening? She asked. Her voice held a quiet fear. Are we in danger? Cale kept his tone calm. Yes, he said, but panic won't help. We need to stay focused. He guided her to a secure observation point with a clear view of the city's perimeter. On the screens, tiny red dots represented the enemy drones approaching fast from the horizon. They moved in formation, almost like a single organism, precise and unrelenting. Lyra's eyes widened. 3,000? That many? Kyle nodded. And that's only what we can detect. There could be more. She shivered, clutching her hands together. Why are they coming here? What do they want? They're after leverage, Kale explained, his eyes never leaving the display. The colony leaders, the city's power core, and possibly you. His words were deliberate but careful. He wanted her to understand without panicking. Lyra looked at him, uncertainty in her eyes. Me? Yes, Kale said firmly. You are important to them, and I won't let them take you. The words hung in the air. Lyra realized for the first time that the quiet guard who had always been near her was more than someone just following orders. Kale's vigilance was more than duty. It was personal courage, a silent promise of protection. Kale moved quickly to prepare for the inevitable attack. He accessed the city's defensive systems, activating automated turrets, energy shields, and communication grids. He adjusted the gravity fields in strategic corridors, ensuring that enemy drones would find movement difficult if they penetrated the city. Every step was precise, calculated, a reflection of countless hours of training and preparation. Lyra followed closely, assisting where she could. Though she had no combat training, she could operate some of the control panels. If we reroute power here, she suggested, pointing to a console, we can strengthen the shield over the eastern sector. That's where the population density is highest. Kyle smiled slightly, impressed. Good thinking, he said. We'll do that. Together they worked in silence, their movements fluid and purposeful. Kyle kept one eye on the screens, monitoring the incoming fleet, and one eye on Lyra, ensuring her safety. He knew that protecting her meant more than keeping her physically safe. It also meant keeping her calm, focused, and ready to act if needed. Suddenly, the monitors displayed a new movement. Scout drones, smaller but faster, had breached the outer perimeter. They zipped past the automated defenses, moving closer to the city core. Kale's jaw tightened. They're testing us, he said. They want to see how prepared we are. Lyra watched as Kyle traced their paths on the holographic display. What do we do? She asked. Kale's mind raced. There was no time to wait for command approval. We intercept them, he said firmly. I will lead a small team to neutralize the scouts before they can signal the main fleet. Lyra hesitated. You can't go alone, can you? I won't be alone, Kale said, motioning to the security officers nearby. But I need to take the lead. It's the fastest way to stop them. Trust me. Lyra nodded, her fear mixed with awe. She had never seen anyone move with such calm precision under pressure. Kale was not just a guard. He was a strategist, a protector, and perhaps the only one who could save the city. The squad followed Kale out of the control center and into the outer city corridors. The scout drones were fast, their sensors sharp, but Kale had anticipated their movements. Using magnetic pulse grenades and strategically timed energy barriers, he guided the drones into traps, neutralizing them one by one. Lyra watched in amazement. I didn't know you could do all this, she whispered. Kyle didn't respond. His focus was complete. Each movement, each decision had a purpose. By the time the last scout drone fell, Kyle and his team had secured the perimeter, giving the city's main defenses time to activate fully. When they returned to the observation point, Lyra looked at him with new respect. You're not just a guard, she said softly. I am what I need to be, Kale replied. Right now, that's enough. The red dots on the monitors were still growing. The main fleet of 3,000 enemy drones was approaching, and their arrival was only minutes away. Kale felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. But he did not falter. Fear was a tool for the unprepared. Calm, preparation, and courage were his allies. Tomorrow, the city may not be the same, he said quietly. But if we act now, we can survive, and we can protect the people. Lyra nodded, Understanding the gravity of the situation, she realized that the quiet guard who had always been at her side was not just a man doing his job. He was someone who would risk everything to keep her and everyone else safe. Outside, the horizon glowed red as the enemy fleet drew closer. The rising threat was real, massive, and relentless. And in the heart of the city, a quiet protector prepared for the storm. Kyle adjusted his wrist monitor, checked the city's energy grids, and prepared his next move. He knew that the coming battle would test every skill he had. And though Lyra still thought of him as just a guard, Kale's mind was already calculating the strategies that might save thousands of lives. Because when 3,000 enemies were on the way, it took more than weapons to win. It took courage, intelligence, and the willingness to risk everything for those who could not protect themselves. And Kale was ready. The sky above Arendor darkened as the first wave of enemy drones entered the city's atmosphere. Their sleek, metallic bodies glinted in the sunlight, moving in perfect formation like a swarm of predatory birds. Kyle stood on the observation deck of the central tower, eyes scanning every movement. He had anticipated their arrival, but seeing them in full force made his heart race. "Kyle, that many?" Lyra's voice trembled. She stood beside him, gripping the railing, her eyes wide with fear and awe. "Yes," Kale replied, keeping his voice steady. "And these are only the first group. The main fleet is still behind them. We need to act fast." He turned to the team of guards gathered behind him. "Positions. Activate defensive grids. Use gravity fields to slow their approach. Keep civilians safe. And stay alert." The guards moved efficiently, following Kale's orders without question. He had trained them well, and now their preparation would be tested. Automated turrets rotated, energy shields hummed to life, and the city's central AI began coordinating defensive maneuvers. Lyra watched Kale's every move, finally beginning to understand the man she had often dismissed as just a guard. His calm, precise movements spoke of experience, courage, and a mind trained to face impossible odds. The first wave of drones reached the city's outer defenses. They were fast, small, and deadly. Kale activated the magnetic pulse cannons, sending the drones spinning out of formation. Energy barriers blocked key entry points, forcing the attackers into narrow passages where Kale's team could target them more easily. "Good work," Kale muttered under his breath as he monitored the progress. "Keep it up." The drones adapted quickly. Some tried to bypass the barriers, others attempted to hack into the city's systems. Kale anticipated their moves, rerouting power to critical systems and deploying countermeasures. Holographic decoys projected the image of a fully armed city guard at multiple points, confusing the enemy sensors. Lyra assisted by analyzing data streams from the drone's sensors. "Kale, they're coordinating attacks on multiple sectors at once," she said, pointing at the holographic map. "If we don't adjust, they'll breach the southern wall." Kale nodded. "Understood. Divert all defensive firepower there. I'll handle the breach directly." He grabbed his personal weapon, a compact energy rifle, and ran toward the southern wall. The team followed, prepared to back him up. The first drone struck with a sharp electric hum, attempting to disable the automated turrets. Kyle fired a precise shot, destroying the drone before it could complete its task. Lyra watched from the observation deck as Kale moved through the battlefield with unmatched skill. He didn't rush, but every movement counted. He used the environment to his advantage, ducking behind support beams, pushing crates to create temporary barriers, and directing his team with simple, clear commands. The southern breach was intense. Waves of drones pressed forward, firing energy pulses. Kyle's squad fought valiantly, using magnetic grenades, energy nets, and well-placed blasts to slow the attackers. Every drone destroyed brought a small victory, but Kyle knew it wasn't enough. 3,000 drones were still out there. Suddenly, one of the drones targeted Lyra's sector. Kyle's eyes widened as he saw the beam lock onto the building where she was stationed. Without thinking, he fired a precise shot, hitting the drone and causing it to crash into the street below. Lyra's heart pounded. "He's amazing," she whispered to herself. "I never realized—" Kale didn't pause. He moved through the city streets with the agility and strategy of a seasoned warrior. Civilians were guided to safety through emergency corridors, energy shields blocking debris and explosions. He ensured that every person, every family, had a chance to survive. By midday, the first wave was beginning to retreat. Kale's strategy and human ingenuity had turned the tide. The drones that remained were either destroyed or temporarily disabled. The city's automated defenses were holding, but Kyle knew it was only a matter of time before the main fleet arrived. Lyra ran to Kale as he returned to the observation deck, breathless but unharmed. "Kale, you saved so many people," she said, eyes shining with admiration. I don't know how you did it." Kyle shook his head. "It's not about me. It's about planning, teamwork, and staying calm. Panic is the enemy's best weapon. We use our minds, our preparation, and our courage." Lyra realized that the man standing before her was more than a protector. He was a leader, a strategist, and a symbol of human courage. He had risked his life, not for recognition, but for the safety of others, and he would do it again, no matter the cost. The calm after the first wave was tense. Red lights flashed across the monitors, signaling that the main fleet was approaching rapidly. Kale knew the real test was coming. The first wave had been a warning, a glimpse of the storm that was about to hit. "Lyra," Kale said, his tone firm, "we need to prepare for the main fleet. It's coming faster than we expected. This city, these people, we have to protect them all." Lyra nodded, now fully aware of Kale's true strength. "I trust you," she said softly. "Tell me what to do." Kale gave her a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of their growing partnership. Together they returned to the command hub to coordinate the city's defenses. Every console, every weapon, every team member would be needed. The main fleet would not wait for permission. They would strike with full force. Outside, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the city. The red glow of the enemy fleet approached like a storm on the horizon. Kale's mind raced with strategies, every plan tested, every possibility considered. And as he looked at Lyra, he felt a renewed determination. The first wave had been dangerous, but it had been just a taste. The main fleet would challenge everything they had prepared. Kale knew they were the last line of defense. And no matter what came, he would not fail, because protecting the people of Arendor and Lyra was more than duty. It was honor, it was courage, and it was what made a single human capable of standing against overwhelming odds. The Quiet Protector was ready. The city of Arendor was no longer calm. Sirens wailed across the towers, red lights flashed in every corridor, and the sound of marching boots filled the air as security teams scrambled into position. The first wave of enemy drones had been beaten back, but everyone knew that was only the beginning. The main fleet, 3,000 strong, was coming. Kale stood in the command hub, eyes fixed on the massive holographic map above the central console. The swarm filled the screen like a living storm, moving closer with every second. His jaw was tight, his mind racing with possibilities. "They're splitting into 3 formations," Kale observed. His voice was steady, but the weight of the situation pressed heavily on him. "One is targeting the city's shield generators, another is aiming for the civilian evacuation routes, and the third—" Lyra stepped closer, her hands clenched. "The third is coming for the tower," she said quietly. She didn't need Kale to confirm it. She knew she was one of their targets. Kale nodded. "Exactly. That's why we need to divide our forces wisely." He turned to the team of officers gathered around him. "Activate choke points in the lower districts. Deploy decoy signals to scatter their formations, and get every civilian underground. If they breach the shelters, it's over. The officers hesitated. But we don't have enough soldiers to cover all 3 attacks, one argued. Kale's eyes hardened. Then we outthink them. We're human. We adapt. Use the city itself as our weapon. Every corridor, every plaza, every rooftop, turn them into traps. His confidence silenced the room. The officers quickly began implementing his orders, rerouting power, repositioning turrets, and coordinating defenses. Kyle moved to a secondary console, his hands flying across the controls. He was already setting his own traps. Lyra watched him with a mix of awe and fear. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't hesitating. He was already 3 steps ahead of the enemy. Moments later, the sky above the city erupted with fire. The main fleet had arrived. Thousands of drones descended like a rain of metal, their weapons glowing red. The city shields flared as the first blasts hit, shaking the towers. Civilians screamed in the distance as explosions echoed through the lower districts. Shields holding at 70%. One officer shouted. "Redirect auxiliary power from the east sector," Kale commanded. "We need to buy time." The battle had begun. Enemy drones swarmed the shield generators, unleashing volleys of energy blasts. Kale activated hidden defense turrets beneath the generator platforms, catching the attackers off guard. Dozens of drones fell in burning fragments, but more poured in to take their place. At the evacuation routes, Kale's traps came alive. He had ordered gravity fields to be destabilized in certain corridors, and when the drones rushed in, they were pulled into the ground like insects caught in quicksand. Human soldiers quickly eliminated the disabled machines. But the third formation, the one aimed directly at the central tower, pressed forward with deadly precision. Kyle knew they wouldn't stop until they reached Lyra. "Prepare the plaza defenses," Kyle said into his comm link. "That's where we'll hold them." He led a small squad to the central plaza, a wide-open space surrounded by tall spires. From there, he could see the swarm approaching, filling the horizon like a black cloud. The squad looked nervous, their hands trembling on their weapons. Kale's calm presence steadied them. "Remember," he said firmly, "they're machines. They can't improvise, but we can. Use that. Fight smart, not just hard." The first wave of drones swooped into the plaza, firing relentlessly. Kale rolled behind a barricade, returning fire with sharp, precise shots. His squad followed his lead, covering each other and moving in perfect coordination. Explosions shook the plaza as drones crashed into the ground. Lyra watched from a secure balcony above, her heart pounding. She wanted to look away, but she couldn't. Kale was everywhere, shouting orders, firing shots, setting traps. He moved with purpose, never wasting a second. Despite their efforts, the swarm kept coming. For every drone destroyed, 10 more appeared. The sky was thick with them, their red lights glowing like an endless storm. Kyle knew they couldn't hold forever. He scanned the battlefield, his eyes narrowing. Then he saw it, a faint signal, buried deep within the enemy network. A control core, a single central node guiding the entire fleet. If they destroyed it, the swarm would collapse. Kale's heart pounded. "There," he muttered. "That's the key." He opened his comm link. "Command, I've located the control core. Transmitting coordinates now. If we strike it, the fleet will fall apart." But the officer on the other end hesitated. "It's too deep in enemy territory. We'd never reach it." Kyle clenched his fists. "Then I will." Lyra gasped. "Kale, you can't." "I can," he said firmly, his eyes locked on the glowing signal. "And I will. It's the only way." The squad looked at him with a mix of fear and admiration. He wasn't asking them to follow. He was stating a fact. He would risk everything, even his life, to protect the city. Lyra stepped closer, her voice soft but urgent. "If you go, then I'm going with you. You'll need me." Kale turned to her, surprised. "Lyra, it's too dangerous." "I can help you navigate their systems," she insisted. I know their codes. I know their tactics. You'll need me to reach the core." For a moment, Kale hesitated. Then he saw the determination in her eyes. She wasn't a frightened diplomat's daughter anymore. She was ready to stand beside him. He nodded. "All right, but stay close, no matter what happens." The plaza shook with another explosion as more drones poured in. Kyle tightened his grip on his rifle, his mind already working through the impossible plan. To reach the control core, they would need to infiltrate the heart of the enemy fleet. It was a suicide mission, but it was their only chance. The city was burning, the skies filled with fire, and thousands of drones swarmed overhead. But Kale felt no fear because he wasn't just a guard anymore. He was humanity's shield. And with Lyra by his side, he was ready to risk it all. The impossible battle had begun. Smoke rose above the towers of Arendor as the battle raged on. Explosions echoed through the streets, shaking the ground beneath Kale's boots. The city defenses held for now, but Kale knew they could not last against 3,000 enemy drones. The only way to save the colony was to strike the enemy's control core. He checked his weapon, adjusted the strap on his armor, and turned to Lyra. She stood beside him, her face pale but her eyes steady. She was afraid. Anyone would be. But she did not back away. "You don't have to come," Kale told her, his voice calm but firm. Lyra shook her head. "You'll never reach the core without me. I know their signals. I know their code. If I stay behind, I'll only be waiting for the city to fall. I'd rather fight with you." Kyle studied her for a moment. He saw no hesitation in her eyes. He gave a small nod. "Then we go together. Stay close. Do exactly as I say." They moved through the city streets, slipping past burning wreckage and collapsed towers. Enemy drones swarmed overhead, but Kale guided Lyra through hidden paths, using service tunnels and abandoned maintenance corridors. Every step brought them closer to the fleet's command hub, which hovered outside the city like a black fortress. At the edge of the city, Kale stopped beside a wrecked transport ship. "This will do," he muttered. He tapped a panel, and the engine hummed faintly. "We'll use it to slip past their scanners." The transport lifted shakily into the air, its damaged hull groaning. Kale steered it toward the glowing red formation of enemy ships. Lyra sat beside him, her hands moving quickly over a data pad. She sent out false signals, disguising their craft as one of the drones. "They won't suspect us," Lyra whispered. "Not yet." The enemy fleet loomed larger as they approached. Hundreds of drones buzzed around the massive control ship at the center. It was a monstrous machine shaped like a black spear, its surface bristling with weapons. At its heart pulsed the control core, glowing faintly with red light. "That's it," Kale said quietly. "Destroy that, and the entire fleet falls." The transport glided through the swarm. Enemy drones scanned it, but Lyra's codes fooled them. For a moment, it seemed their plan might actually work, but then a burst of static filled the cockpit. "They're suspicious," Lyra said, her voice tight. "Their scanners are adapting. They know something is wrong." Kale gripped the controls. "Hold them off as long as you can. Once they realize we'll already be inside." The transport drew closer to the control ship. Weapons locked on them, red lights flashing. Kale pushed the engines to maximum, diving straight toward a docking bay. Alarms blared as enemy fire streaked past them, but Kale's hands moved with precision. The transport weaved between blasts, sparks flying as energy beams scraped its hull. "Hold on!" Kale shouted. The transport crashed hard into the docking bay, sliding across the metal floor before slamming into a wall. Smoke filled the cabin. Kyle kicked the hatch open, pulling Lyra to safety. Enemy drones swarmed the bay, their weapons glowing. Kyle fired without hesitation, each shot striking true. He moved quickly, his rifle an extension of his will. Lyra stayed close, using her pad to disrupt the drone's targeting systems. Together, they fought their way through the docking bay and into the ship's dark corridors. The control ship was like a maze, its halls alive with red lights and pulsing energy. Drones moved in endless patrols, their mechanical footsteps echoing through the narrow passages. Kyle led the way, silent and focused, his every sense alert. Lyra's fingers danced across her pad. I can block their sensors for a few seconds, at a time. But once they lock on us, we'll have to fight. Kale nodded. Then we make every second count. They slipped through the corridors, ducking into alcoves and shadowed corners. Twice, Kale had to strike silently, disabling drones before they could sound alarms. Lyra guided him with quick whispers, pointing out paths the machines had overlooked. Finally, they reached the core chamber. The room glowed with a strange red light. In the center stood the control core, a massive crystalline structure humming with power. Energy pulsed through it like veins of fire. Around it, dozens of drones stood. Guard, Kale exhaled slowly. This is it. Lyra's hands trembled as she studied the glowing structure. If we overload it, the feedback will destroy the entire fleet, she said. But, Kale, the blast will reach this chamber too. Kale's expression hardened. Then we don't have much time. Set the overload. I'll hold them off. Lyra's eyes widened. Kyle, do it, he said firmly. I'll keep them busy. You finish the job. He stepped forward, rifle blazing. Drones turned toward him, red lights flashing as they opened fire. Kale moved like a shadow, ducking, weaving, firing with deadly accuracy. Explosions shook the chamber as drones fell one after another. Lyra rushed to the control core, connecting her pad. Her fingers flew across the screen, sending commands into the system. Sparks burst from the crystalline surface as it resisted her intrusion. Almost there, she shouted. Kale fought with everything he had. His rifle overheated, forcing him to switch to his sidearm. He kicked a drone aside, slammed another into the wall, and kept moving. His body ached. His breath came hard, but he didn't stop. Not while Lyra worked. Finally, the core pulsed violently. Red cracks spread across its surface. Lyra's pad sparked in her hands. It's overloading, she cried. Kale grabbed her arm. Then we run! They sprinted down the corridor as alarms screamed. Behind them, the core chamber glowed brighter and brighter. The walls shook as energy built to a breaking point. Drones collapsed mid-step, their systems failing. The entire ship trembled like a beast in pain. Kale pushed Lyra through the docking bay, searching for an escape pod. He forced the hatch open, shoving her inside. Go! What about you? Lyra shouted, panic in her voice. Kale climbed in after her, slamming the controls. We go together. The pod launched just as the control ship erupted in a blinding explosion. A shockwave tore through the fleet, disabling drones one by one. The red lights flickered and died. Thousands of machines dropped lifelessly from the sky. From the pod's window, Lyra watched the destruction, her heart pounding. We did it, she whispered. Kale leaned back, exhausted, his armor scorched. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again to meet hers. No, he said softly. You did it. I just bought the time. Lyra shook her head, tears in her eyes. No, Kale. You risked everything. For me, for the city. You're more than I ever believed. The pod drifted back toward the burning but still standing city of Arendor. The fleet was gone. The battle was not over yet, but hope had returned. And for Lyra, Kale was no longer just a guard. He was the man who had risked it all to save her and humanity. The escape pod landed hard on the outskirts of Arendor. The hatch hissed open, and Kyle stepped out first, scanning the sky. The enemy fleet was gone. The black clouds of drones that once blotted out the stars had vanished, falling silent after the destruction of their control core. Lyra climbed out after him, her face streaked with soot but lit by relief. Around them, the city still burned, but it lived. People who had hidden in shelters began to emerge, staring at the sky in disbelief. For the first time in weeks, there was no swarm, no shadow, only silence. Kyle lowered his rifle. His arms were heavy, his body aching from battle, but his heart was steady. He had done what needed to be done. Lyra turned to him. "You didn't just save me. You saved everyone," she said quietly. Cale shook his head. "Not everyone. Too many were lost." His voice carried the weight of every fallen soldier, every destroyed home. "But without you," Lyra insisted, "the rest of us would be gone too." The survivors gathered around them, whispers spreading through the crowd. Some recognized Kyle, the quiet guard who once stood at the gates with no rank or recognition. Now they saw him differently. His armor was scorched, his face lined with fatigue, but he stood tall. A commander pushed through the crowd. General Vera, wounded but alive, placed a hand on Cale's shoulder. "Reports say it was you who destroyed their core. Is it true?" Cale hesitated. He had never cared for glory. "We destroyed it," he corrected. He looked at Lyra, whose hands still shook from the overload she had forced into the alien machine. "She broke their system. I just fought to give her the time." The general studied him, then nodded slowly. "Then you are both the reason we still draw breath. History will remember this day." Around them, the people began to cheer, first quietly, then louder. Kyle felt a strange weight lift from his chest. For so long, he had been nothing more than a guard, a shadow at the edge of the city. Now, for the first time, he was seen. But the war was not yet over. Scouts reported that smaller groups of drones were still active beyond the horizon. Without the core, they were leaderless and disorganized, but they still posed a threat. Arendor needed time to rebuild, and Cale knew more battles would come. That night, a meeting was held in the council hall. The city leaders gathered, their voices tense but hopeful. Cale and Lyra stood at the center as plans were drawn. "We must rebuild our defenses," one counselor urged. "Resources are thin," another replied. "We've lost half our fleet." General Vera raised her hand. "We still have something better than ships or guns. We have them." She pointed toward Cale and Lyra. Lyra stiffened. "Me? You broke into their core," the general said. "You understand their code better than any of us." "And Cale," she looked at him with a small smile, "you fight like no soldier I've ever seen. You lead without asking, and people follow. That's what this city needs." Cale frowned. "I'm no leader. I was just a guard." Lyra stepped closer to him, her voice soft but firm. "You were never just a guard. You've been carrying this city on your shoulders all along. We only see it now." The council voted, and it was decided. Cale would lead the new defense force, and Lyra would guide their intelligence unit. Together, they would prepare for whatever threat came next. Days passed. The fires were put out, the wounded cared for, and the city slowly began to breathe again. Kyle spent his time training new recruits. Men and women who had once looked at him as nothing more than a gatekeeper now stood in line, eager to learn from him. He drilled them not just in weapons, but in discipline, patience, and courage. "Strength alone will not save you," he told them. "It's what you fight for that gives you power. Remember that." Lyra, meanwhile, worked day and night in the command center, decoding fragments of enemy signals. Her knowledge grew and, with it, their understanding of the machines. She and Cale often crossed paths late at night, their tired eyes meeting with unspoken trust. One evening, as they stood on the walls of Arendor, Lyra broke the silence. "Do you ever regret it? Risking your life like that?" Kyle looked out at the stars where no drones darkened the sky. "If I had fallen but the city lived, no, I wouldn't regret it." Lyra studied him. You think of yourself as replaceable. But you're not. To me, to this city. You're the reason we're still here." For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind carried the scent of smoke, but also the sound of laughter from below, the sound of life returning. Weeks later, scouts returned with news. The scattered drones were finally gone, their power broken. The war that had threatened to erase Arendor was over. Humanity had won. The city held a great gathering in the main square. Thousands filled the streets, banners waving, voices rising in song and cheer. On the balcony above, Kale and Lyra stood with General Vera as she addressed. "The people, Arendor lives," the general declared. "And we live because of two who refused to give in when all hope was lost. Lyra, who broke the enemy's code, and Kyle, the guard who became our shield." The crowd roared with thunderous applause. Kyle stood silently, uncomfortable under the praise. But when he glanced at Lyra, he saw her smiling at him with pride. Slowly, he allowed himself a small smile, too, for he knew it was not about titles or glory. It was about what they had saved, the families, the children, the fragile spark of humanity. That was enough. That night, when the celebrations ended, Kyle returned to the city gates. He stood where he had always stood, watching the horizon. But now it felt different. He was not just a guard anymore. He was a protector, a warrior, and a symbol of what humanity could achieve. Lyra joined him, her footsteps light. She stood beside him without a word, their shoulders brushing. For a moment, they simply looked out at the stars together. Finally, Lyra spoke softly. "So, what are you now, Kyle? Still just a guard?" He turned to her, his eyes steady, his voice calm. "No, I'm the one who stands when no one else will." And with that, the story of the guard who risked everything became the legend of a man who gave humanity hope.